Hello, welcome to another episode of Telling the Reframe Story. I'm Jeff Sapansky, aka Tall Jeff, founder and CEO of Reframe Technologies. In today's episode, we're going to talk about something a little bit different, or maybe take a step back from what we've been talking about in the past. I mean, it does all go back to the messy desktop that we have here and all of the clutter and noise of our current desktop environments. But I wanted to break that down a little bit more because we usually talk about this as productivity or productivity tools and trying to figure out how to make ourselves more productive and do these tools make us more productive. And the first thing is definitely that when we look at this, there's definitely data indicating that we are sort of struggling now with the technology and that some of the benefits are now being offset by costs in various places. And so this comes in different forms. We can just talk about how much time we're wasting switching between applications and trying to keep the context of the different applications in our head. We can talk about all the noise that's generated from all the different feeds and inboxes. In particular, tools like Slack and Microsoft Teams that people are using. How much is that distraction really costing us in productivity? And the answer is a lot. And then there's even this more broader question of things like latest AI technology advances, even the newest stuff in the news recently. But even going back to previous stuff of the internet itself and cloud applications. Is this stuff actually making us more productive? And that's even ignoring the human side of it is, maybe it's somehow technically more productive, but is it making us feel better? Is it making us feel more empowered? This starts to open up a broader question, which is even asking about or looking at productivity the right question here exactly? We're going to talk a little bit more about that. First, starting from the research behind it. There's been some really good research around this, sort of trying to break the dichotomy between different data points that we're seeing in different studies of, yes, clearly this increases task productivity over here, but at the same time, somehow we don't feel more productive. And there's definitely indications that different types of tools and work habits around these tools, something that Cal Newport calls the hyperactive hive mind workflow, the sort of default workflow associated with sort of arbitrarily gluing together a bunch of applications and trying to get work with them done. And so what's going on here? Task level productivity has definitely increased, certainly with the earlier generations of computing, going from paper tape and punch cards to interactive computing to the desktop GUI. For task-based work, that is completing an individual straightforward task, is clearly made more productive by not having to use papers and pencils and putting stamps on things to communicate with people. But at the same time, there's this sort of paradox going on, which is the success of all these tools and the quantity of all these tools with all the different information and notifications that's coming at us, we're basically going into information overload. And this is the big cost here, because this is basically hitting a tipping point where productivity is starting to fall. But even more importantly, the thing that's happening is it's starting to impact our capacity as humans to do creative knowledge work, which we believe, certainly at Reframe, that this really is the ultimate goal. A much better metric to be talking about is not trying to look at this as a productivity question, like we talk about how many widgets can we make on a production line in a repeatable process, but truly creative work where we're trying to empower humans to do something that other people haven't done before. This is the first time we're inventing something or creating something unique. And so this really gets down to a much more fundamental question. Are we making people more creative? And the way we talk about measuring this is advancing human capacity for creative work individually and collectively, putting all the right things in places to put our minds at ease and to get us trusting each other and align better for doing more productive work individually and as an organization overall. And this is the place that we see the massive opportunity of attacking this problem. And so that's really what Reframe's all about, is thinking about, well, hey, wait a minute, what's really the job to be done of our computers? And we believe that's about increasing human capacity. Even if you do it at the task level, which is like, are we actually helping people get something to focus better and get something done more efficiently, and then also know what to do and to focus on next? And it's really odd when we look at the computers overall that we don't see anybody focusing on that. In other words, is taking that on as a job to be done explicitly as the mission and vision of the company. And this is really what Reframe is about, is saying we're all about increasing human capacity. In the same way that if you looked at Moore's Law in computing, which talked about every 2 years how the performance, the number of transistors, which basically related to the performance of microprocessors, was doubling every 2 years. Reframe is looking at its mission in a very similar manner of what do we do, release after release, technology improvement after technology improvement to be increasing human capacity, the human capacity of our workforce as applied to knowledge work. The thing that's interesting to talk about then is if we take a step back and think about, well, where in our existing environments and our existing tools are there gaps against that mission? And it's really interesting to see that there actually is a lot of opportunity here, a lot of low-hanging fruit to tap into to really advance the world here. And so the first thing we'll see is that all of our tools really are set up to deal with responsibilities and actually ignore the idea of accountability. Who actually gets to make the decision, or who owns the decision, who's accountable for things, versus just throwing tasks at people with an expectation that they do them. And in fact, this gets into a whole other area where we start to realize that the tools and the environments today are about capturing expectations of each other rather than actually facilitating agreements between each other, really being aligned to what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it and bought into the same things. We also see in the current tools that there's no really direct involvement in the articulation work. This is all the context we're keeping in our heads as we copy and paste between application and application, push something from Slack into another tool through some kind of an integration. The computer's doing the digital paper copying of that, but it's not really keeping track of the why or even the history of what has been done in that regard in any kind of structured context. It's completely on the humans to look at all this stuff in hindsight and try to figure out the context that got us there. And then the other thing we kind of realize is this whole environment, that coordination, but even just of the interaction of our tools is also completely manual. I'm resizing windows, I'm switching between tabs, I'm search to go find things. And yes, we have better search tools and we can use ChatGPT to maybe answer language queries to go look something up for us or maybe answer a question. But is it really putting all of the knowledge in the context to empower me or us as the humans using the computer to be making the best decisions, to be as most creative as possible? This is exactly where we see the future of work going relative to setting people up with increased capacity for this knowledge work. And the other thing that we can bring to the table is to talk about, we have all these ideas that can inspire new places to go, but what are the constraints we want to apply to make this practical and possible to take the existing computing environment and evolve it into this new type of platform that we want to have. And what we see there is, very important properties are compatibility. We want to be able to bring your existing tools together in a new way by making enhancements to the environment. This is not about throwing away your current operating system and your current applications and getting new ones. This is about making those things better. How do we break the silos and really go beyond just thinking of this as productivity applications to improve productivity, but building an environment that facilitates increasing human capacity. Obviously, if you want people to adopt this, we got to think about single player mode. And by that, I mean, if I download the Reframe or a similar, what we would call organized work environment type tool, using this type of thinking, can we make individuals more productive just operating by themselves, even if they're not even connected to the internet or speaking to anybody else? But then obviously, if we are networked with other people or working with other people physically together or remotely, can we get even a better compounding network effect of productivity? We want to be workflow agnostic. This is not about whether we use agile processes or whether we use waterfall like the old days or somewhere in between those extremes. We're not trying to be opinionated in that way. What we're trying to be opinionated is in the ways of taking the human psychology and the coordination efforts and just holding the context of humans making informed decisions so that we can have that context available to us for our future selves and to share it with people in various ways. All of this with the aim of increasing capacity of the humans to focus on the creative stuff, not the logistics of making all of this happen. And so, yeah, really that's what we're doing with this. And then we think of this, obviously, wanting to have a nice organic path of adoption of this and really thinking this longer term as a platform play such that, yes, we'll be able to build and integrate with existing applications, but knowing where all of this is going, we think there can be a whole nother generation of applications built on the idea of the organized work environment platform to usher in really the next generation of computing. We've gone from batch processing to interactive terminals to the desktop GUI that we have today. We've augmented it with this great cloud applications and centralization and collaboration around the networks, different networks in the internet. But we're also realizing in this push that we are reaching into the productivity paradox here where the leverage of the previous generation of technologies is turning into overload. And so the way to look at this then is Reframe and what we're doing with this organized work environment context and building a new grammar that we'll talk more about, a new type of language for collaboration, is what we believe is going to usher in the next generation of computing and what we call this organized work environment. Thanks so much for your time. Always feel free to reach out to me. Love to hear from people and talk things. Here's my email address, or you're also always welcome to reach out to anybody else on the team. I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you very much.